Welcome to the Brain Saver podcast, where I teach you how to change your brain, protect your future, and be a part of the generation that is going to end Alzheimer's and dementia. Before we start every podcast, I have to let you know that you can protect your brain, you can reverse cognitive decline, and it is much simpler than it may seem. Now let's jump right into today's episode. Hello. Today's episode is going to be really great for you of the Brain Center podcast. It's going to be super practical, using stuff that you can do starting today. And so I hope you get a lot out of today's podcast. You know, the truth about your brain, you already heard me talk about this a ton, especially if you're a common listener, is that you can change it no matter what age, no matter where you're at along your cognitive health journey. You can work to make your brain better. And today we're talking about the 6 biggest causes of cognitive decline that don't just happen in the brain, but happen in the body. And I'm not just going to tell you what they are, but we're going to talk about how they actually damage your brain and then how to fix it, how to fix the issue. Now, a disclaimer up front, all of these issues are going to be, more overarching views of each one. It's not going to be super personal to your specific story, your specific brain. So keep that in mind. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, because you might not have inflammation issues. You might not have gut issues, or the gut issues that I talk about today are not the exact same ones that you have. So the fixes aren't going to be the exact same. But in general, these are 6 big causes of cognitive issues and cognitive decline that we see day to day, especially here at Bradley Health with my clients. And so that's why we're covering them. But keep in mind, they may not be exactly about you or for you specifically. Jumping into the big causes. This number 1, I talk about a lot. It's a very big overarching theme of decline across the body, not just the brain, and it's a buzzword, and that's going to be inflammation. Talking about inflammation, it is your body's natural response to anything that kind of goes wrong, infections, sickness. When you work out, you're breaking down muscle, and that's causing, low grade inflammation that your body actually works to build back. And that's actually a good thing. We need inflammation to help defend our cells, help defend our body. But outside of these protective, like short bursts that it's in, it can become destructive. If it's chronic and you have chronic inflammatory markers elevated in your body, then you're going to start running into issues. This chronic low grade inflammation can kind of run rampant, and it starts slow. It starts quiet along in your body before you can notice really any huge symptoms. But most of the time, if you're running this chronic low grade inflammation, you're not going to feel good. Symptoms could be running all the time, making you feel terrible, like the puffiness that you feel across your body, in your face, the inability to lose weight if you're trying to lose weight, trouble sleeping, never feeling refreshed, even after sleeping or having a relaxing day. All of that can be dated back to these inflammatory markers being elevated. How does inflammation actually damage the brain specifically, though? The body, it kind of makes sense a little bit more in people's minds, but how does it break down the brain? First of all, it breaks down the blood-brain barrier, which is this protective kind of shell you can think of that encompasses your brain. Harmful molecules can then enter the brain when the blood-brain barrier breaks down, especially people that have a toxin-based Alzheimer's diagnosis or cognitive decline. We want to make sure the blood-brain barrier is super, super strong so we can block those harmful toxins, those harmful molecules from entering in through the tiny holes that have been poked within the blood-brain barrier. And that is what inflammation does. It suppresses BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is kind of like fertilizer for your brain. It helps your brain grow, it helps it repair, and if you have excess inflammation, it is not able to produce enough of that and utilize it effectively. Inflammation also drives your synapse connections in your brain and cellular breakdown within your actual brain cells. And so a lot of people that have atrophy of the brain, or if someone has got, like my mom had an MRI and it actually showed spots where cells were missing or dead, high levels of inflammation in the brain can do this as well. And so there's a lot of ways it can damage the brain. And there's a lot of ways that it'll damage the body, which in turn will damage the brain, but we're going to get to those in just a second. What's driving inflammation in most people, though? A lot of it is going to be kind of the basics. Ultra processed food, refined sugar, messes with the gut, can cross over a leaky gut and enter the blood brain barrier. We don't want that to happen. Poor sleep, chronic stress, which is just stress is a good thing. again, acutely, but when it never gets turned off, especially with, social media and the news, and you got your kids and your grandkids and all these things you have to worry about, chronic stress is very prevalent in most people's lives. Gut dysfunction, as I mentioned earlier, where your gut just isn't functioning well, where you don't have the right microbiome in your gut, you don't have enough stomach acid, whatever it may be. Environmental toxins and hidden infections are a big driver. Whenever you get a virus, whenever you get a bacterial infection, there's going to be inflammation in that area. Like you get a cut and it turns like a brighter red because it's slightly infected. Then that's where you get that bright red. Is that's inflammation. And then a sedentary lifestyle kind of creates this internal inflammatory response because, your muscles aren't being used. Your cardiovascular health isn't as good. So a sedentary lifestyle contributes as well. How to actually stop inflammation. We're going to talk more in depth about this in the next five causes of decline, because they kind of all couple into inflammation being the overarching theme of decline here. But how to actually stop it. We got to remove the biggest inflammatory foods within your diet. Ultra processed, refined sugar, refined grains. If you have any intolerances, dairy, gluten, whatever it may be, you need to remove those as well. A lot of people that have thyroid issues remove gluten, and it starts getting rid of a lot of inflammatory markers in their body. Now, along the keto flex 12-3, dairy and gluten should be removed completely. That's kind of the rule there. Dependent on where you're at and say like a prevention journey, if you don't actually have a diagnosis and you're like, I'm just looking for this higher level of prevention, you could cut those two things out. But a lot of my clients, I don't actually have them necessarily cut out, especially if they don't have any inflammatory markers because of it. I'd rather them eat, extra cheese on their salads to increase their protein amount if they're not hitting their protein targets. And the gluten, a lot of times I like to say, you need to enjoy your life still, trying to make sure that you're cutting out complete things of these inflammatory foods can also be super stressful. And so depending on where you're on your journey, if you have a cognitive decline diagnosis, it's a no-brainer, period, end of story. We're cutting these things out because you don't have that time. You can't risk it. But if you're in a preventative state within your journey, yeah, sure. Let's make sure that you're doing everything else right. Then these tiny dots of, say, like a cookie or some cheese or whatever it may be are not necessarily going to hurt you long term. Prioritizing deep sleep is when your body repurges and detoxifies. And so we need to make sure that you're actually getting into that deep sleep state. A lot of people are waking up multiple times a night, and you might think you're sleeping well, but if you're doing that, you're not staying in deep sleep long enough. So we need to make sure that's a priority. And you can do that however you can. If you have sleep apnea, we've got to treat the sleep apnea first thing. If you're sleeping in a room that's too hot, can we cool it off? If it's not dark enough, can we darken it? If you don't have a good bedtime routine, if you're sitting on your phone or watching TV right up till bedtime, maybe we need to fix that. However, we need to prioritize deep sleep for you is kind of the tactic. There's no specific set way to do it. It's just a matter of what you have going on in your lifestyle. Adding omega 3s and antioxidants daily. Omega 3s are going to be your healthy fats. These are super powerful anti inflammatory foods. We need to add those in. Same thing with antioxidants, which is going to be things like berries, bright leafy greens. Any fruit or vegetable that's super colorful has going to have some extra antioxidants. We need to add those into your diet. And the omega 3s are going to be things like olive oil, salmon, mackerel, sardines, avocado oil, avocados. And adding those in are going to be super, super beneficial for lowering inflammation. Moving every day. Wherever you're at is where you should start. If you haven't gone on a walk, if you haven't gone to the gym, if you haven't done anything, let's just start by moving for 10 minutes, first thing in the morning or whenever you can get it in. If you go to the gym somewhat consistently, maybe let's shorten your workout times to 15 minutes so that you can get the workouts in as consistently as possible. Wherever you're at is where you should start. You don't have to do everything all at once, especially when it comes to the movement. And then getting your key inflammatory markers tested is kind of like this next level step. So HSCRP, homocysteine, and then if you want to look at kind of how the insulin and glucose is affecting your inflammation, you can look at HOMA-IR as well. But that's something to get from your doctor, or with my clients, I run them actual blood markers that I want to see to make sure that we're optimizing their protocol. And so if I suspect somebody has high inflammation and they haven't had these tested, the HSCRP and homocysteine are what we're running first. Going into I just talked about HOMA IR and insulin sensitivity. This is going to be cause number 2 is insulin resistance. What is insulin resistance? So if you have diabetes, you likely know what insulin resistance is. Before we continue, just got an espresso machine. Espresso is fantastic. And coffee actually helps, create BDNF a little bit, but if you get green coffee extract, it's even stronger. Just a side note. Insulin resistance is when your cells stop responding properly to insulin. And so you can no longer use the insulin to pull glucose into your cells for fuel. And so think of it like there's a pipe with holes in it. The glucose is going through the pipe. It needs somewhere to go. It needs to go into those holes, which are the cells. The insulin has the key. It's like the key is broken. It cannot open the cells. The glucose cannot go in. And so it builds up. We do not want that to happen. This can also happen in your brain cells. You can have insulin resistance within your brain cells. And this is actually a type of Alzheimer's that we look at here at Bradley Health. And within the RECODE protocol that Dr. Bredesen created is this glycotoxic, when you have so much insulin resistance that you have zero fuel for your brain and it's causing high amounts of inflammation. And that's where the ketoflex comes in, which we'll talk about in just a second. Some researchers have even called Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, which is where I kind of first got into nutrition because I heard about that. And that's a very big oversimplification, but it should not be understated either. That label exists for a reason. How does insulin resistance actually damage the brain? Well, I just told you you don't get enough fuel. The brain is the most metabolically expensive organ in the body. It burns about 20% of your entire body's total energy. So this little thing up here burns 20-ish percent of energy because you're constantly using it. It's constantly sending signals and firing. You can think that like if you don't get enough fuel within your brain, of course it's not going to be able to send as strong of signals at the right times as it's supposed to. When insulin resistance develops, the brain literally starves. It's just sitting in this like sea of glucose that it cannot access, and it starts starving. It creates, cellular loss, inflammation, atrophy, and we do not want that to happen. Chronically high blood sugar will drive this inflammatory state more than anything else. So you kind of get a double hit. Your brain's not getting the energy it needs, and you're really, really inflamed. What's driving it in most people? Again, highly processed, high carbohydrate American diet. And when I'm talking about high carbohydrate, I'm not talking about like fruits and vegetables. I'm more talking about, the refined grains that are really prevalent in today's diet lifestyle. Even these like new high protein foods that have been pushed so hard for weight loss, like they still have a ton of carbs. Like they're not necessarily these, super healthy foods. They're highly processed. And so we want to make sure that we're eating the right things. A sedentary lifestyle. If you're not moving, you're not using the right amount of glucose that you're intaking. Because if you're intaking, I eat 250 grams of carbs a day, close to 300 some weeks, but I'm also lifting weights. I'm running. I'm walking my dog. I'm using that fuel. If you're eating all of that and you're not using that fuel, you're going to have this big energy discrepancy and you're going to get super insulin resistant because there's so much insulin pumping through to try and make that glucose used. Poor sleep. Even one bad night of sleep, and this is backed in study, measurably reduces insulin sensitivity. Chronic stress, again, cortisol, especially chronic cortisol, will directly drive blood sugar dysregulation because when your cortisol goes up, it starts telling your body to pull in that glucose. And so if it's constantly high, you're just going to want more and more and more of it. And then gut dysfunction. You're not going to be able to absorb the nutrients you need and not send the right signals to utilize the glucose properly. Can you see a pattern here? There's all of these things kind of couple together and are all kind of correlated and related here. How do you actually stop it? Even if you're diabetic, implementing the KetoFlex 12-3 basics is the number one thing you've got to start doing right away. We've got to fix everything through the diet. We've got to fix everything metabolically. I've had clients come to me with A1Cs over 8. They've been struggling with it for a long time. They're on medication and it's kind of working. We go into this lower carb, more keto flex approach. We make sure that they're getting enough omega-3s, enough vegetables, and enough healthy proteins. And we bring their A1C down over a few months. It's not all at once, to almost normal ranges, like just outside of the pre-diabetic ranges, but they feel so much better. They're able to lose weight and their brain functions so much better on this plant-rich, low glycemic plate with high healthy fats. We're also making sure you're fasting. So 12-hour overnight fast, that's what the 12 stands for. And then no food 3 hours before bed. And that one is kind of understated a lot. It's really, really important to do that so that your body has time to digest. And when you go to sleep, you can get better deep sleep and detox a lot more effectively. Prioritizing protein at every meal stabilizes blood sugar throughout the day, and at every snack. Like if you're someone who's snacking throughout this, non-fasting window, that's totally fine. But we got to make sure that you're not just snacking on carbohydrates. We need to stabilize the blood sugar through protein as well. Walking after meals and just working out in general, even 10 minutes post meal is going to measurably lower post meal blood sugar spikes. As your body is able to actually utilize the glucose it's given. And so we want to make sure we're breaking it down effectively. And if you want to get blood tests, fasting glucose, fasting insulin, A1C are kind of the main three there. With the fasting glucose, fasting insulin, you can also work on getting that HOMA IR, which is just a calculation. And the A1C, most people know. If you don't know it, your doctor will likely run it every time you go to get like a yearly checkup or whatever it may be. Going into cause 3, talking about walking, sedentary lifestyle is going to be a big driver that, you need to fix, but it's super hard. So like, how do we actually fix it? Um, it actually damages the brain. The lack of movement means lack of blood flow. And that's kind of the big thing that I harp on the most when it comes to movement is we need blood flow. When you get up and you start walking, especially if your cardiovascular health isn't great, your blood's going to be pumping a little harder. Your heart's going to be working. It's going to be working hard. Cardiovascular health is directly related to brain health as well. The blood-brain barrier is directly related to blood flow. If you're not getting enough blood flow, your brain is also deprived of the oxygen and nutrients it needs daily. We got to make sure that's happening. The reason why I like lifting weights so much for brain health specifically, running's great. The cardio has a huge role to play, but I think lifting weights gets understated because when you think about lifting weights, you're contracting your muscle over and over, and that acts as like a plunger for the actual blood. It's pumping and like moving that blood through your system. So I think it's super understated how important the actual weightlifting is. There's also muscle loss is associated with a sedentary lifestyle, having osteopenia, osteoporosis, and so we want to make sure that we don't have that muscle loss. And muscle loss also contributes to insulin resistance and metabolic dysfunction, compounding the damage. What's driving it in most people? Desk jobs. I sit in front of a desk a lot, talking to clients, putting in protocols and things. I get up as many times as I possibly can throughout the day. But people also have desk jobs. They're looking at screens all day, and they get home after work and they sit down as well and look at screens all day. And what the biggest issue is the more you sit, the more sedentary you are, the more fatigued you're actually going to feel because your body, the Newton's law, object at rest stays at rest, right? We want to make sure that you're getting up and moving as much as possible. Exercise being framed as like an all or nothing mindset. If you can't do a full workout, nothing gets done kind of deal. We need to make sure that all or nothing mindset is non-existent. It doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or an hour. Whatever you can get in, you can get in. And that's the important part. Low energy, making movement feel impossible, which I just talked about, which is often caused by inactivity itself. And then the state of the world today, huge focus on entertainment and consumption instead of going out and doing. And we want to make sure that we're going out and doing new things and making sure that we're walking every day. It's kind of the non-negotiable for me and my clients, getting up and actually getting those steps in, adding resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. Wherever, again, it's possible for you to start. If it's 5 minutes of doing just body weight stuff, that's totally fine. And if you need to adapt it because it's really hard for you, like if you're older and you can't necessarily do things like push-ups, you can do push-ups against the wall. You can do squats with assistance on a chair. You can just sit in a chair and get up and sit back down. And whatever you need to do to start is what you need to do to start. So we always adapt this to all of my clients. Add resistance training 2 to 3 times per week is kind of the baseline that I have people do, especially to start. You don't need to do 5 times a week. Some of my clients do more because they're more advanced and they want to do it, but I never push it that far. Break up sitting throughout the day. Even just standing for a few minutes every hour is going to improve your blood flow. If you have a standing desk, my desk stands, that's going to be really helpful. And then reframe movement as medicine. Movement should never be a punishment. We should not just be trying to move to lose weight and trying to get that cardio and calorie burn in. it should be looked at as medicine because that's truly what it is. So we want to make sure they're getting enough movement in day to day. Now, before we get into 4, 5, and 6, I covered the first 3. I'm going to try to get through the next 3 a little faster. If you want to check out your own brain health risk, I do have a free brain health risk assessment that is not a diagnostic tool. It's just to show you, like, based on, and it covers a lot of these factors I'm talking about today, based on your answers to these 6 to 8 factors, this is where I see your risk in terms of developing any cognitive issues. Again, not a diagnostic tool. It's just going to kind of give you a kick in the butt on, okay, where are you actually at? Or it might show you like, hey, you're actually doing pretty well. You don't need to worry about this as much, because I see that a lot for people that are trying to prevent it. You're so worried about what you have going on. You're so worried about your brain because you watched your parents go through it and they score, a 10 out of 30 on the quiz. And, that's like a perfect score. That's great. And so take the quiz. The link is in the description of the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, whatever. You can go click the link and take it. But after you finish the podcast. All right, cause 4, nutrient deficiencies. Nutrient deficiencies kind of come through the diet. If you're not eating enough, whole foods, different foods across the spectrum to get all the right nutrients in, we want to make sure that you're getting enough of those raw materials to function, to repair, and to protect your brain. It's really important to make sure you're getting enough of those nutrients in. Most people are chronically deficient in at least 2 to 3 micronutrients that are really, really important to your brain. How does it actually damage the brain? Well, it depends on the micronutrient you're missing. Things like omega-3, DHA, brain cell memories can't communicate properly. Every neuron in your brain is partially made of DHA. We want to make sure that you're getting enough omega-3. Without vitamins like B12, B6, B1, there's going to be some inflammatory markers build up, like homocysteine. And B12 is super important for memory formation. So we want to make sure you're getting enough of that. My mom specifically was bottomed out on B12 the first time she went to the neurologist, and she had to get infusions. Without magnesium, sleep quality and stress also can suffer. And when we also look at like toxicity, we can see, most of the time we're seeing like zinc and magnesium low. So we're looking at that mineral buildup and seeing if you have enough of that within your body. Without vitamin D, immune regulation and brain cell protection also deteriorate. We want to make sure you're getting enough of that vitamin D, whether through the sun or through supplementation. The majority of people that run into inflammatory markers are pretty short on vitamin D. And we want to look at the ranges based on what's optimal, not what's normal. And so we need to make sure that we're pushing to the higher end of these ranges, at least based on what the FDA guidelines are or what the blood work guidelines are. What's driving this in most people, nutrient deficiencies, is going to be just low nutrient density diets. Want to make sure you're getting enough of the high nutrient density foods, which are going to be simply whole foods. But we also want to make sure you're getting a wide variety of foods, which is what I think a lot of people are missing. Poor gut absorption is also a key factor. If somebody starts eating healthy and they're like, I don't feel any better or whatever, a lot of times your gut might not be absorbing nutrients how it's supposed to. If you have gut dysfunction, you'll likely know that. But a lot of people also just, especially people that are older, your body just might not work as well as it used to. And so you have worse absorption in your gut. This is where supplementation comes in, or adding in nutrients that will help shuttle these other nutrients that you're not absorbing through the body. And then chronic stress is also going to deplete you of nutrients like B vitamins and things faster than you may realize. And so we want to manage all of those. How to stop it? It depends on the nutrient you're short on. So typically I'm saying like, hey, people are most of the time short on, things like omega-3, vitamin D, B12. Eat fatty fish 2 to 3 times per week. Add ground flaxseed and walnuts daily for plant-based omega-3s. I love walnuts so much. Get tested for all of these markers, which you're likely going to at your doctor's appointments when you get blood work. But you can also, make sure that you're at the top of those ranges instead of just in the normal ranges. So if your vitamin D is in normal range, but it's all the way at the bottom of the normal range, I'd say always try to push it up to the top. And then the supplements that I always recommend, regardless of who you are, you're likely never going to go over on omega-3s. So an omega-3 DHA from, I like Nordic Naturals. A B complex, you can never really go wrong with. There's a lot of really good ones out there. So no super strong recommendation on that. Magnesium glycinate before bed is a big recommendation. I've had clients almost like fix their sleep just by taking it. And then a vitamin D3 with K2. Again, that one I would say is like, let's base it on your actual results here. Cause number 5, gut dysfunction. I'm going to go through a little bit faster because I could have an entire podcast on actual gut dysfunction. The gut-brain connection is super underappreciated. It's being talked about more, but I'd say it's still more underappreciated than it should be. It's constantly communicating through immune system, through neurotransmitter production, and actually a lot of the serotonin and dopamine that gets created in your body is from the gut. How it damages the brain. A dysbiotic gut, which is where there's an imbalanced microbiome, is going to drive systemic inflammation. Leaky gut is going to lead to, these bad nutrients, toxins being absorbed through the leaky gut into the bloodstream, crossing the blood-brain barrier. Again, 90% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. So poor gut health is directly related to mood issues, cognition issues, and sleep issues. And then gut dysfunction amplifies everything else on the list: nutrient deficiencies, inflammatory markers, the sedentary lifestyle, not as much, but we need to make sure that your gut is functioning well. You might have something like intestinal bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine, SIBO. So we want to make sure that it is functioning well. What's driving it in most people? Antibiotic use can destroy beneficial bacteria along with the bad bacteria. So if you've been on antibiotics or you were on a strong dose a long time ago and you still have gut issues, that could have been the driver. Ultra processed food, again, not going to talk about that too in depth. Chronic stress is going to disrupt gut motility and microbiome balance. And then a low fiber diet. We need to bump up your fiber within your diet because it's super key to digestion and creating this microbiome that the good bacteria can feed on. How to actually stop it: increasing dietary fiber, vegetables, legumes, flax seeds are all going to be big drivers of this higher fiber diet. Fermented foods are key for the probiotics. So Greek yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi is one of my favorites. And if you are going to go like an easier route, you could do kombucha. Just make sure it is not the high sugar kombucha. Get no sugar added kombucha, because you're going to pump a ton of sugar in there as well, which you don't necessarily want. Reducing the ultra processed foods is again important. And then if you do have like these gut issues and you want to take a probiotic, you can. Just make sure it is refrigerated. If you get a probiotic off the shelf at Walmart, it's going to be, all the bacteria is going to be dead. It's going to do nothing for you. So don't waste your money on that. And then managing stress. The gut-brain axis runs in both directions. So chronic stress is going to be one of the fastest ways to dysregulate gut function. So we got to make sure that you're fixing the chronic stress there. And then the last one, again, I could do an entire podcast over this specifically: toxic load, toxic burden. The cumulative load of environmental toxins, if you've been exposed to heavy metals, if you've had mold in your house, like so mycotoxins, and then any other chemicals in the body. And if you've been exposed to this really acutely or like over time, you're going to run into issues. And so a lot of the people that, all their blood work looks normal, they're like, I have no idea what's going on, sometimes can be correlated to a toxic load. And it is one of the most underdiagnosed contributors to cognitive decline that I've seen over and over and over again. And most of the time, people aren't screening for heavy metals or mold toxins unless there's a past history knowing that that's been an issue. How it actually damages the brain. Heavy metals, so mercury, and this a lot of times I see with people that have had dental amalgams from a long time ago. There's actual mercury in those. We want to make sure that we're managing that. Or if it is leaking and that there's a high level of mercury, getting them taken out is risky, but very important if that's the case. But if you have zero mercury and you still have the amalgams, most of the time you're not going to want to take them out because it's not causing an issue. Taking them out is a lot riskier. This can accumulate in the brain tissue and disrupt neurotransmitter function. This can also lead to a high buildup of amyloid plaque. Mold and mycotoxins, looking at like ochratoxin A specifically, is going to directly damage neurons and have been found multiple times in the brains of people that have had toxic-based Alzheimer's. We want to make sure that mycotoxins are purged. And there's a full level of toxin load purging and these protocols that I are way too in-depth to get into on this podcast because it's not what this one's about. But there's a lot of great info about that on like Apollo Health's website if you want to go check out that. And then environmental chemicals obviously disrupt hormone function, mitochondrial health, and the immune system, all which affect actual brain function. What's driving it in most people? Water damaged homes and mold is typically the most common. The mold exposure is the most common that we're going to see. Non-toxic cookware not being used. Now, this one's less so. I think that this is more of an optimization standpoint, but I think it still should be talked about. The heavy metals, so like mercury and lead, dependent on what your job was, places that you lived, if you have the dental amalgams, can be looked at. And then we want to just make sure you're using cleaning products that are cleaner, don't have nearly as many toxins or no toxins at all. And then mercury, I've actually seen a case study where somebody in Florida ate so much fish that with high mercury in it, so like tuna, swordfish, king mackerel, shark, all these like muscly fish, that they actually had mercury poisoning and ran into cognitive issues. And as soon as they stopped and started clearing that out, it went away because they were eating such high mercury fish. How to stop it? You got to go through the protocols. I'm not going to get super into the protocols here because it's different dependent on what you have going on. If you do suspect you have toxin or toxicity based cognitive issues, just reach out to me. We'll talk about it. It needs to be very personalized. So I'm not even going to get into how to stop it. That's been the 6 things. That's the 6 biggest causes I typically see within Bradley Health and what Recode or the Recode program is typically seeing. Now, there's so much more that goes into it. I have people all the time on Instagram and Facebook being like, well, what about hormones? Or what about, this or that or the other? And it's like, yes, those are all contributors. There are so many contributors to Alzheimer's and dementia diagnosis that we can't cover them all at once. But these are the 6 big ones that I'm consistently seeing within Bradley Health. And that's why we need to change the standard. That is why these single drug approaches will never work. That is why there's never been, a standard of care within the traditional medical system that is helping people actually take care of their brains, because it is so complex. It takes so many steps, and it takes an actual protocol like Recode and what we do here at Bradley Health to understand what your specific drivers are. You might not have 5 out of the 6 of these, but the one that you have might be causing the most issues, and you might need to look at that one specifically. You might have all 6 on very low levels, all compounding. So figuring out what is the biggest root cause issue for you is the key that you need to look for. And that is where I'm going to leave it today. I hope that you got a lot from this podcast. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. My name's Tyler. I'm in Bradley Health, and I will see you in the next one. This has been the Brain Standard Podcast, and I truly thank you for listening. I hope after listening to this episode, it might light a fire inside of you to really take charge and control of your brain's future. And if you found it useful, maybe share it with a friend, follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, and I'd really, really appreciate a 5-star review. And for more information, all you have to do is visit bradleyhealthcoaching.com. I have a couple of resources on there, or you can book a call with me and figure out how to take the next steps in taking care of your brain. Thanks so much again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.